Day, Junior Tickies. Today we will be looking at Malapropism, Spoonerism, and Totology. All the grammar errors that must be avoided and corrected in both writing and speaking in English. I'm Mrs. Kruger. Here we go. The English language, as you know, is known for being used as a language of international communication in the modern world. And wherever you originate from and whatever your native tongue may be, it is likely that you will be learning English and it will be invaluable, both in your professional and sometimes in your personal life as well. Of course, the English language frequently frustrates new learners with various grammatical hurdles and stumbling blocks. So it's important to go through some of the things that could go wrong. Words and phrases that sound fine in your head can look like gibberish when written down. That is, if you realize that you've made a mistake in the first place. It is easy for little grammar mistakes to slip by, especially when you're self-editing, and that obviously happens when you're doing a writing assessment for English, but it can also occur when you're doing a speech and so on. Now, how do we prevent grammatical errors if we are not aware we're making them? Well, there's always ways to improve your vocabulary, such as reading books, reading blogs, playing games where proper English is used, using flashcard apps, but you should have in mind that it can't happen overnight. So to boost your vocabulary, it is always good to remember, reuse words that you've heard or seen that you didn't know was spelled that way or wasn't used that way, or that you just don't know. So vocabulary is a big part of improving your common errors, especially, as you grow older and become a professional one day. Also, explaining words you don't know is one helpful way to get you through a difficult part of learning new words. I always encourage my students when writing to form simple sentences. Now, it sounds silly because you want to boost your mark, but if your sentences are so complex that they stop making sense, then unfortunately, it doesn't matter what you wrote, and because your language mark is going to be poor in any way. A common mistake that beginners make is to frame complicated sentences. In other words, you create these elaborate sentences, and unfortunately, we lose understanding. Especially for the markers, they need to have a very clear image of what you're trying to say. Now, most learners believe that the use of big words is impressive, which often changes the meaning of what they want to say. So, to avoid confusion, begin by forming simple sentences first, then move to the next step once your basics are out of the way and it is clear. At times, you may feel that you're unable to express yourself and you're taking too long to learn. Do not worry, it's part of the process, especially if this is not your home language. Another thing that I often encourage my learners to do is to check the meaning of words and then use the word correctly. Now, when you check the meaning of the word, it's not just what it means, but it's also what type of word it is, what part of speech, because they go hand in hand. You cannot just use a word because, oh, well, I found the meaning in the dictionary, if it is placed incorrectly in the wrong place or the wrong time. That could end up being disastrous. So my advice to you is that you don't use words if you're unsure about them. Stick with the basics because they will afford you more marks in your writing, in your comprehension, and so on. I always have a dictionary on hand, whether that is a hard copy of the dictionary or I download an app. Dictionary.com is a free app that you can download and it works on all smartphones. It's quite nice to have, and I'm sure that if you ask your teacher if you could use your dictionary on your phone, it won't be such a big issue, and you might even encourage other learners to do it. Now, whenever you come across a new word, check its meaning and learn some example sentences to understand and remember it. You can also learn a new word a day to expand your vocabulary. This rule is also applicable on any grammar-related doubts that you might have. For example, confirm if the tense that you have used is correct, or write out the sentence and check whether or not the first verb of the first sentence is more or less the same as the rest of the verbs in your writing piece or your speech that you are delivering. Now, very important is you must know what possible mistakes there are. The best way to improve is to know where you're going wrong, right? Makes sense. Once you realize your mistake, it's easy. You work on it. And this is the nice part about editing your work before you write your final draft of anything. And I know it's a common practice to sometimes start just writing, get it out of your system and, you'll edit later and, pop a measly preparation or a spider diagram at the end of your essay writing. This actually makes your work harder, right? How do we overcome this? Well, first, practice. I know it sounds silly. How do we practice for paper 3? How do we practice common errors? We literally practice them away. Take quizzes, do exercises, do other activities, and edit things. Take a piece, you can get them from the internet or ask your teacher, and just edit your own work. When you get back that essay and you can't understand why your mark wasn't an 80, you got a 60, then perhaps consider that you did not edit thoroughly. Right, so this way you can find out which concepts you are clear about and which ones need a little bit more practice. Pay more attention to these topics, like the ones we're discussing now, and devote more time to these in order to perfect them. Keep doing this at every stage, even after you are good at English. And as I've mentioned, you need to, after you've edited your work, proofread. I think this is one of the most important steps, and yet people miss it all the time. If we just read through what we've written, what we've typed in our messages, emails, and so on, then it would alleviate the mistakes that we make. And yes, they do become silly mistakes that cost us marks. Right, so what do we look for? Spelling mistakes, typing errors. Obviously, when you're writing, that's alleviated. You are looking for formatting. Does it lay correctly on the page? And so on. Usually people get tired after writing and skip this step. Please don't do that. Right, and then of course, I really believe in slow and steady wins the race. Remember this mantra, especially when you are writing, 3-hour paper, which just writing pieces. It's important that you do not rush. It's important that you plan proper and execute correctly, whatever piece of writing that you are doing. Now we're going to look at what are these 3 common errors that should be avoided. How do you identify them as well? Because here is the crux of these 3. They do not just appear in language. Yes, they are literature and language and grammar errors, but number 1, they can create certain things. They can come across in writing pieces, and you yourself could make this error. That is why we are discussing it. Right, so let's have a look there. Now here is one of my favorites. It is called malapropism. Malapropism is when you misuse a word or words, and it can lead to confusion, and of course it is unintentionally hilarious to the people around you that might know what the correct word is that you wanted to use. Have you ever mistakenly used a completely wrong word while speaking and it caused people to look at you strangely or even laugh at you? Well, you're not alone. Many celebrities, politicians, well-known fictional characters actually do this as well. And in case you don't know, there's a name for this linguistic goof. As I said, malapropism. Right, it is unintentional. It is sometimes accidental when it comes to plays. For example, in Much Ado About Nothing, Constable Dogberry uses malapropism. He purposefully uses words incorrectly. Now, obviously, he is a buffoon, and he comes across as trying to impress people around him by using big words, but in fact, he uses the wrong words, and this creates the humor. For example, he says, "Our watch, sir, have indeed comprehended 2 auspicious persons." We know that that is incorrect. What are the 2 words? Comprehend, it should have been apprehended, and auspicious should have been suspicious. That's correct. And of course, you laugh at this because, he is acting like a buffoon. There are so many other examples that I've left you on the screen, but the whole point of this is that you need to be able to identify which word has been used incorrectly, and then what we are going to ask you is to correct it. If it's a language paper, identify and correct. If it's literature, you have to tell us once again the example and of course the effect of it. Always creates humor. If it is in writing, it means that you need to correct it. All right. There's another example of Mike Tyson here, and what is very cute, of course, is in 2012 when Justin Bieber also said the 16th chapel instead of the Sistine Chapel. So as you can see, creates a bit of humor. Right, let's have a look. Right, so now let's have a look at what could happen at a possible sentence. We're going to go through them. I've highlighted them for you, or bolded them for you, pardon me, so that you can have a look. How would you correct these? Let's go through 3 of these. The first one, the doctor administered an anecdote. Sounds pretty much the same, but I don't think it's quite that. An anecdote, of course, is a story, very often used in speeches, and you'll hear your teacher use this word as well. It's a little story about your past that you bring in to prove a point. Not quite what I think the doctor should administer to a patient. He should administer, or she, an antidote. Right? Do you see the malapropism? Right, let's have another look here at one of the others. The malapropism in I have good punctuation. I'm never late. Punctuation, of course, the thing that we use in a sentence to indicate a pause or a stop or combine words. He should have used punctuality. I have good punctuality. And you see how closely spelled they are? It's quite easy to make these mistakes. Now, we obviously know that this comes from somewhere. Mrs. Malaprop was the one that, out of politeness, accidentally used the wrong words, and this is where the name also comes from. And it's quite funny. All right, go through the others and see what you can come up with. Spoonerism, another one that is quite comical, and just like malapropism, can result in both confusion and lead to hilarity. Now, unlike malapropism, spoonerisms are not words replaced by other words, but they are words that get mixed up. They are words or phrases where the order of the sound is confused. A spoonerism is a speech error, most often, and this happens when you're very nervous and you end up switching certain words or letters even. And then what is interesting is that it can either create a same sounding or a word that is recognized, and your brain automatically just switches them and they come out wrong in your mouth, of course. Now have a look. You can say things like a bunny phone instead of a funny bone, or you've uttered a spoonerism there, or a jelly bean can become a belly jean. Son, it is now kissed Mary to cuss the bride. All right, you can see, of course, they're swapping the 2 parts around. And we don't actually know why this happens. It's just something that happens when we're nervous, or when we speak too fast, or our mouth doesn't catch up to our brain, or the other way around. And this happens. So when it does occur to you, laugh it off, carry on. And you can see that I've put the correct version of what was being said in brackets there for you. All right, let's go to the next part. Right, now let's see if you can do this. Take a few seconds. See if you can figure out what is going on here. Know your blows. Perhaps it could be blow your nose. Or go and shake a tower. It's interesting. Maybe it should be go and take a shower. Tease my ears. Ease my tears. Slightly different things there. Maybe causing the same effect, right? Nicking your pose. Something you shouldn't be doing is picking your nose. You have very mad manners. I feel like that's a colloquial saying for something is great, right? But in this case, it refers to you have very bad manners. Right, so go through them, see what you can figure out. Right now in this example here, we have a combination of either Spoonerisms or Malapropisms. Remember, Malapropism is where we've replaced a word with an incorrect word. It's when you use big words incorrectly, essentially. So what I'd like you to do is identify the word and supply the correct word in its place. For the Spoonerism, obviously you have to correct it and then swap the error. Correct the words or word that is wrong. So the surgeon had discovered that the mass was malignant and deformed to operate quickly. Interesting there. Let's see what you can come up with. Right, move to the next one. The toddler sipped thoughtfully at the gold glass of juice. Right, now the first one you should have identified the malapropism and corrected it. And in the second one, you should have identified the Spoonerism and swapped the word or the letter around again. Right, go through all of them, write them down, see if you can figure them out. The answers are in your booklet. You can follow along there with us. Now let's look at tautology. They love asking this in the NSC exam. They've done so for the past few years. It's come up more than once, and it is used very often as well in your editing part of your language paper, but it can create humor. So have a look at your cartoons as well as your advertisements when looking for tautology. Right, we love asking this question. Now, tautology is when you use different words to say the same thing twice in the same sentence. The money should be adequate enough is an example of tautology. If it is adequate, does that not imply that it should be enough? Right, we often see that synonyms are used, like repetition, redundancy, and it can occasionally occur that the repetition of certain words becomes tautology. That is how you identify it. In most cases, it is best to choose just one and not use so many synonyms that it becomes verbose. Verbose means it's too much, it's overdone, talk too much. So when editing this, ensure that you remove the synonyms that actually mean exactly the same thing. If you say, for example, I went to see him personally, how else would you see him, right? Would you see him impersonally? So try and avoid that. That, for example, is not a synonym, him and personally. I saw him, right? I implies that it is personal. So there it is tautology that could be left out. Either you lose the word personally, but then your sentence won't make sense if you leave out I. So think carefully about what you're going to do there. If we look at some of the other examples that are coming up, you'll notice quickly what the tautology is. And it's very important that when you do your writing, take your pen, draw a line through the tautology. All right, let's have a look. Now, it might appear to us that some of these tautologies, they sound like things we say all the time. But that might be the problem, is that we've, become so used to speaking this way. Let's have a look. Remember when 4G cell phones were a new innovation? The word innovation in itself means new. So drop the new. The evening sunset was beautiful. There is no morning sunset, so a sunset implies evening. Drop the evening. I need a new hot water heater. Unless it's the name of something, rather leave out hot. Charlie proudly told his mom that he had made the scarf himself. Right, how else would he make it? And would he make it through someone else? And then is it really him that made it? Right, so have a look at the others. See if you can identify and fix all. Which word would you take out? All right, darlings, thank you for watching. I hope it sheds a bit of light. The biggest thing with your common errors is you need to practice. The only way our eye and our brain gets used to identifying common errors is when we actually edit documents, when we edit our work, and we are able to identify those mistakes that we've made. Now, obviously, when you're practicing, try to go back the next day with fresh eyes and edit your own work. I know that sometimes when we're too close to a document or a project, or we've taken so long that we've exhausted that ability, take a break. Go for a walk, go for a swim, play the piano, whatever floats your boat, and then come back and edit that document. Right, I hope it goes well. Good luck.